go.
So we're here in MIT with Professor Noam Chomsky of linguistics. So first of all, is it fair to say you've been a long-time supporter of Senator Sanders?
Well, I knew him a little bit back in the 1980s when he was the mayor of Burlington, and spent some time with him then. Liked what he was doing, approved of his career. I haven't been an active supporter, but I think he's, as far as this campaign is concerned, I think he just stands out as the most, by far the best candidate.
Back in August, you called Bernie Sanders a fawn in the side.
Sorry?
Back in August, you called Bernie Sanders a fawn in the side of the Clinton machine. Do you still think he's just a fawn in the side of the Clinton machine?
A what?
A fawn.
What? I don't catch the word.
A fawn.
Thorn?
Yeah.
Oh, inside the Clinton machine.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's, what I meant is, I don't know what I said, that he's, part of the positive role he's playing is to compel the mainstream Democrats, the Clinton machine, to move a little bit in the progressive direction, just because of the popular forces he's mobilizing, which I think is a good thing. That alone is a good thing.
Do you think he has a chance of winning?
Well, a couple of months ago I would have said it's virtually nil, but it surprised me how well he's doing. I don't think there's a great chance, but I think I wouldn't say it's ruled out.
After Scalia dying,
Scully? Yeah.
If a more liberal justice is appointed,
It's almost impossible.
do you think it could help further Sanders?
Well, it could, but I think the Republicans are simply not going to permit it. They've made it very clear, and I don't see any reason to think they'll back off, that they won't even hold committee hearings. So there'll be no way to get it through. It could be the Democrats will probably try to provoke them to do that because of the popular effect, which is hard to predict. But I don't think they're going to back off. They're a pretty crazy group. So the chance of anybody, and even if Obama does suggest somebody, he's not going to be particularly liberal. Could be somebody sort of centrist,
When you look at the two campaigns, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, would you say that Hillary Clinton's campaign is more self-centered around Clinton with stuff like the "I'm with her," compared to Sanders' more united campaign?
I don't think there's much difference. If you take a look at the Sanders campaign, it's for the presidency. There are no candidates proposed for the Senate, for the House, no local organizing for anything from school committee up to governor. I mean, it's just the presidency, which is a weakness. I mean, if you look at what the right wing has done over the past 20 years or so, they did the right thing. They started organizing locally. They got towns, state legislatures, even things like school committees. And finally it builds up to where you have a national organization. And out of that can come a presidential candidate. But a presidential candidate without any organization anywhere else is at best be in a very weak position.
Why do people latch on to fear? Why do people like the fear rhetoric that comes out of Donald Trump, and why do you think it's so popular right now?
Why do they
like the fear?
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Well, a large part of the country is extremely angry, frightened, disillusioned, often for very good reasons. And somebody comes along and says, "Look, I'm going to change it and make everything better." They'll leap to it. Nobody else is saying anything that responds to their interests. He's saying all kinds of things. He's a wild card. But some of them do respond to the concerns that people have. Somebody comes along and says, "Look, I'm going to make the country rich. I'm going to make the country great again. I'm going to get you jobs," and so on and so forth. Yeah, that has an appeal after 40 years of 35 years or so of neoliberal programs that have led to stagnation for much of the population and serious decline of democratic participation. And what they see as threats in the world. So, it's very easy for people who are in trouble to manipulate them to turn against people who are even in more trouble than they are, rather than the actual agents of what's happening to them. So, the immigrants, the welfare mothers, so they're the problem, not the guys who are actually running the show. That's unfortunately pretty easy. We've seen that happen over and over, happening to extent in England as well.
Yeah. You called America a fundamentalist country to some extent. Is that linked to Trump?
Religious, it is. I mean, in fact, what the Republican Party shifted so far to the right in their policies that they simply couldn't get votes on their actual policies. And one thing they've done is mobilize sectors like the fundamentalist religious sectors, which in the United States are huge. This goes way back to colonial times. The U.S. has always had a very extreme religious fundamentalist culture. Not everyone, but there's part of it that's very strong. There are very few other countries, if any, where maybe a third of the population think the world was created a couple thousand years ago, or 2/3 of the population are expecting a second coming, and half of them in their own lifetime. You just don't have that in other countries, certainly not in other developed countries.
George Bush is now helping his brother, Jeb, and Bill has been campaigning for Hillary Clinton. Do you think that American politics is now focused around families and dynasties?
Well, that's what the establishment is hoping, but so far they failed. They failed badly with Bush, and they're sort of staggering with Clinton. Those are the two dynasties. I mean, what's happening both in the United States and in Europe, in fact, is that the mainstream political organizations are declining, and what's developing is at the edges, both left and right. It's happening in Europe very dramatically.
Why do you think Clinton's lost the youth vote so badly?
Why should young people, what does she offer young people that appeals to them? I mean, does she appeal to you? No, to other young people too. People want something that offers some answer to their idealistic hopes, their future, something exciting that's worthwhile, not just look, I'll do more of the same, which has been harmful to you for 30 years.
Bernie Sanders, in the eyes of many, is weak and inexperienced on foreign policy. What do you think about his stances on foreign policy?
Well, it's very hard to say what it is. He said very little about it. Mostly what he said is he supports Obama. So it's hard to identify a foreign policy in the Sanders campaign other than pretty much a continuation of Obama's policy. He's been very positive about it. Like he supports the drone program, he supports the huge support for Israel, no matter what they do. He supports the Iran deal. He supports, as far as I know, he supports the military buildup. He hasn't said a word about it, to my knowledge, but I imagine he supports the huge buildup of nuclear weapons, the expansion of NATO in Eastern Europe, and so on. Since he hasn't said much, it's hard to know. But since he's kind of avoiding the topics and simply expressing a general admiration for Obama, I think that's the only conclusion you can try to draw.
Is it true you worked with? Is it true back in the 80s you worked with Sanders on American intervention in Central America?
That who worked with Sanders?
You. You agreed with Sanders on his policy for Central America.
He didn't say a lot, but I think he was pretty critical of the Reagan support for the really murderous regimes in Central America and for the Contras. I'm sure he was against that. But, you know, mainstream Democrats were. In fact, Reagan had to kind of go around Congress to support like in Guatemala, Congress blocked Reagan's efforts to directly support the government atrocities. Reagan had to call in other countries to do it, Israel, Taiwan, Saudi Arabia to fund it, and so on. And on the Contras, Reagan had to set up this deal with Iran to try to get funding for them, which kind of blew up in the Iran-Contra things. So it wasn't, I mean, I'm pretty sure Sanders opposed all that, but a lot of mainstream Democrats did.
Lots of people would say that in relation to the rest of the politics going on right now in America, that what Bernie Sanders is leading is a revolution. Would you agree with that?
Bernie Sanders is, as far as I can see, a pretty traditional New Deal Democrat. I mean, his policies, the ones he's proposed, wouldn't have surprised Dwight Eisenhower very much. The spectrum has shifted so far to the right that now a traditional Democrat seems way out at the extreme. The same thing's happening in England. Jeremy Corbyn would have been a kind of a mainstream labor figure back 40 years ago. Now he seems way out. The reasons the Labour Party just became kind of moderate Thatcherite. So he looks very far to the left. And it's happening in continental Europe too. During this whole neoliberal period, the political spectrum has shifted to the right.
Thank you.